Welcome to Biden Brief. The content of the briefing includes 11 of the most scathing allegations in the House Ethics Report about Santos. If House Republicans boot Santos, they don't lose much. Pressure mounts as Israel combs through Gaza hospital for Hamas's presence. First FT, oil slumps to lowest level since July. Corporate, global leaders peer into a future expected to be reshaped by AI, for better or worse. 11 of the most scathing allegations in the House Ethics Report about Santos. Washington Post. House investigators found substantial evidence that controversial Representative George Santos, Republican, New York, knowingly violated ethics guidelines, House rules and criminal laws, according to a report released by the House Ethics Committee on Thursday. If House Republicans boot Santos, they don't lose much. Washington Post. The House Ethics Committee has released a report finding substantial evidence that Representative George Santos, Republican, New York, committed the alleged actions he'd been accused of, including fabricating parts of his personal history. Santos, who won election in a district that backed Joe Biden in 2020, has not made a significant difference in voting this year. Republican leaders may now feel less inclined to protect him, as his reliability as a vote for the majority has decreased. If Santos is removed from office, it is likely he will be replaced by a Democrat or a less conservative Republican, as Biden won his district by 8 points. Pressure mounts as Israel combs through Gaza hospital for Hamas's presence. New York Times. Israeli troops are continuing their search of Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, for evidence of Hamas using the facility to hide weapons and operate tunnels. The military has not yet provided proof of a network of tunnels, but a spokesman has said that a tunnel shaft has been found under the hospital, and a vehicle on the hospital grounds filled with weapons has been uncovered. Israel claims that Hamas has hidden its military fortifications and command centers inside civilian infrastructure like Al-Shifa, which has led to many civilian deaths during the Israeli military campaign. The United States has backed Israel's assertions that Al-Shifa hospital was used by Hamas, with U.S. intelligence agencies independently concluding that it was used as a command and control node and storage facility. The international community is calling for the protection of civilians in Gaza, with the UN Security Council adopting a resolution calling for urgent humanitarian access. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called for an investigation into what he describes as serious violations of international law in the war, accusing both Hamas and Israeli forces of war crimes. First FT, oil slumps to lowest level since July. Financial Times. Oil prices have fallen to their lowest levels since July, putting pressure on the OPEC+ group of major oil producers to extend and deepen production cuts when they meet in Vienna in 10 days. Brent crude fell 5.2% to just under $77 a barrel, while the U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate dropped 5.5% to $72.48 a barrel. The slump in prices is adding pressure to Saudi Arabia and Russia, whose government budgets come under strain when prices fall below $80. Corporate, global leaders peer into a future expected to be reshaped by AI, for better or worse. Associated Press. Tech CEOs and global leaders gathered for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference in San Francisco to discuss artificial intelligence, AI, and its impact on society. While many CEOs, such as Microsoft's Satya Nadella and Google's Sundar Pichai, expressed optimism about AI's potential to transform industries and improve living standards, others, such as former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, warned of the risks of misusing the technology. Concerns centered around job displacement and the need to retrain workers who lose their jobs due to AI advancements. With Xi in U.S., China's influencers put lid on anti-West rhetoric. Nikkei Asia. Chinese social media platform Weibo has seen a shift from anti-US and nationalist influencers to a more positive tone following the meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden. Chinese state media has been delivering positive messages to its domestic audience, leading to a change in tune from nationalist influencers, with many either avoiding the subject or treading carefully around the topic of US-China cooperation. Netizens have reacted sarcastically to the change, and some have called influential figures two-faced for their sudden shift in attitude towards the U.S. Biden to lift curbs on Chinese forensic lab in fentanyl deal. Bloomberg. The U.S. will lift restrictions on a Chinese agency accused of human rights violations in exchange for Beijing's planned crackdown on the fentanyl trade, according to a Biden administration official. Joe Biden's deal with Xi Jinping to curb production of illicit fentanyl, a deadly synthetic drug, was one of the main achievements for the U.S. president resulting from his high-stakes meeting with the Chinese leader. China's Ministry of Public Security's Institute for Forensic Science, a national network of crime labs, will see restrictions on access to U.S. technology lifted as part of the agreement. The West never had a chance at winning over the world. Bloomberg. The recent conflict in the Middle East has damaged Western power and credibility in the Global South, a term that refers to emerging nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The West's sudden interest in the Global South was driven by self-interest and a desire to build alliances against Russia and China. However, the conflict in Gaza has led to accusations of genocide and double standards against Israel and the West, damaging their reputation in the Global South. Furthermore, Israel's failure to define a viable future for itself and the Palestinians has adversely impacted its closest ally, the United States. Fears surge that radical Islamist terrorists will target the U.S. Washington Post. A recent poll conducted by Fox News has shown that more than 70% of Americans are concerned about attacks by Islamic terrorists in the U.S. This concern has increased significantly since the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016 and the Hamas incursion into Israel in October 2021. Fox News has repeatedly discussed terrorism and terrorists in the context of the U.S.-Mexico border, which has likely contributed to the increased concern. The article suggests that this could be a positive electoral development for former President Donald Trump, as he has previously been favored by voters concerned about terrorism. China's Xi is courting Indo-Pacific leaders in a flurry of talks at a summit in San Francisco. The Toronto Star. Chinese President Xi Jinping held individual talks with the leaders of Mexico, Peru, and Fiji on the sidelines of a summit of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, economies. In his meetings, Xi pledged China's support for Peru as the host of next year's APEC summit and expressed China's willingness to import more agricultural products from Peru. He also praised Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador for his leadership and reform efforts, and agreed to deepen cooperation on counter-narcotics efforts. Additionally, Xi met with Fiji's Prime Minister and referred to Fiji as a good friend and a good partner in the Global South. These meetings came after Xi's 4-hour meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden, highlighting the intensifying competition between China and the United States in the Indo-Pacific region. One friendly meeting, what's changed, what hasn't in China-U.S. rivalry? CBC. The first meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping since the spy balloon incident has been described as constructive and productive, with a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson calling it fruitful and in-depth. The leaders have agreed to resume communications between their militaries and to cooperate on cracking down on fentanyl. However, experts have warned that the meeting did not represent a reset of their relationship, but a temporary pause in the escalating rivalry. The resumption of military contacts was described as half a loaf, as high-level dialogue between military strategists has not yet restarted. Furthermore, several incidents during the summit served as a reminder of how fragile the détente remains. A U.S. congressional committee released a report on an illegal biolab in California that was allegedly run by a Chinese national who was in the U.S. illegally, while a U.S. congressional committee published the names of business leaders who attended a dinner with Xi, questioning their support for Xi's policies towards Hong Kong. Biden not likely to be charged in documents probe, WSJ. Reuters. U.S. President Joe Biden is not expected to be charged in the special counsel investigation into his handling of classified documents, according to sources cited by the Wall Street Journal. Special counsel Robert Hur is expected to release a report in the coming months that will be critical of Biden and his aides. The investigation centers on the improper storage of classified documents at Biden's home and a think tank office. Biden has said he was surprised by the discovery of the materials and expected them to be inconsequential. The investigation into the handling of classified documents is also targeting former President Donald Trump. Senior U.S. FDA official Woodcock to retire next year. Reuters. Dr. Janet Woodcock, the Principal Deputy Commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has announced her plans to retire early next year. Woodcock, who has been with the FDA since 1986, twice led its pharmaceutical division for over a decade each time, and played a crucial role in reshaping the drug approval process. She served as the acting commissioner during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic and oversaw the review of vaccines and treatments for the virus. However, she was not considered for the permanent head of the FDA due to opposition from lawmakers in the U.S. Senate. The Xi-Biden summit accomplished little. But it really mattered. Washington Post opinion. The recent meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping in California has brought about progress in U.S.-China relations. The two leaders have agreed to have regular communication and improve crisis management between their armed forces. Biden also rejected the idea of decoupling the U.S. and Chinese economies, and instead emphasized the importance of robust engagement. The meeting comes at a time when China's economic growth is slowing and foreign investment in the country has turned negative. The article argues that engaging with China is better than disengagement or confrontation, but it also acknowledges the need to address China's human rights abuses and confrontational behavior. For Biden, a subtle shift in the power balance with China's Xi Jinping. New York Times. Chinese President Xi Jinping appeared to adopt a toned-down approach called charm offensive when he met with President Joe Biden on the edges of Silicon Valley recently. The change may reflect the fact that Xi desperately needed some things from the United States. His list included a revival of American financial investments in China, and a break in technology export controls that have temporarily hampered Beijing's ability to make advanced semiconductors and the artificial intelligence breakthroughs they enable. The question now is whether Xi's charm offensive is a lasting shift or a tactical maneuver. While Biden's aides were pleased by the concrete outcomes of the meeting, they conceded that those may be short-lived, designed to help Xi get through the rough era of bankruptcies, property value collapses, and loss of consumer confidence. Nonetheless, Biden seems happy to take advantage of the breathing space. Friday briefing, Israel continues to search Al-Shifa. New York Times. Israeli soldiers are still searching Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, which the Israeli military claims was used as a base by Hamas. The Gaza Health Ministry has said that thousands of people remain inside the Al-Shifa hospital compound with little food and water. Fighting is still ongoing around the hospital, with the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, an Iran-backed group, claiming that it is battling Israeli forces near the hospital. Israel has released videos showing military equipment that it claims was found within the hospital, including guns, grenades, protective vests and military uniforms. However, the images have not been independently verified. Pressure is building on Israel to prove its claims, with its foreign allies' support for its military response depending on the evidence it can provide. The U.S. did not block a UN resolution calling for humanitarian pauses in the conflict, marking the first time that Washington has not blocked a resolution that does not also condemn the Hamas attack. UN nuclear watchdog warns of Iran's enriched uranium. Yahoo! Iran's growing stockpile of near-weapons-grade nuclear material is raising concerns among former and current United Nations (UN) inspectors that the turmoil in the Middle East is providing Tehran with an opportunity to achieve a latent atomic weapons capability. Over the past 2 years, Iran's government has removed many of the cameras the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) uses to monitor Tehran's nuclear facilities. Iran has also blocked IAEA inspectors from accessing the country, and has failed to explain the presence of undeclared nuclear materials at 2 Iranian sites. Iran is now the only country in the world enriching uranium to 60% that does not have a declared nuclear weapons program. Uranium enriched to 90% purity is considered weapons grade. The IAEA's Board of Governors will convene next week, where it could censure Iran for its non-compliance. However, American and Western officials do not believe the UN can effectively pressure Iran on its nuclear advances given the deep divisions within the organization. She warns Biden that Taiwan issue is biggest threat to U.S.-China relations. Yahoo! Chinese President Xi Jinping has warned U.S. President Joe Biden that the Taiwan issue is the most significant threat to peace in U.S.-China relations. Xi emphasized his preference for a peaceful reunification with Taiwan, but indicated conditions where the use of force might be considered. Biden reiterated the U.S.'s commitment to maintaining peace and stability, but declined to endorse intervention in a conflict. Biden referred to Xi as a dictator and claimed to have made real progress on various issues, but no agreements were reached on detained U.S. nationals, and Taiwan remains a contentious issue. Illinois earmarks $160 million to keep migrants warm in Chicago as winter approaches. Associated Press. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has announced that an additional $160 million will be provided to help migrants who are arriving in Chicago. The funds will be used to launch a temporary shelter that is suited to winter weather. However, the shelter will also provide services such as rental assistance and help with paperwork in order to enable people to live independently as soon as possible. The move comes as 700 new migrants arrive in the city each week. Business highlights: workers approve contract with GM, Starbucks staff strikes on busy Red Cup day. Associated Press. General Motors, GM, has become the first Detroit automaker to reach a ratified deal with its unionized workers, potentially ending a contentious labor dispute. United Auto Workers Union members voted to approve the new contract, with 54.7% in favor. The deal had a big lead in voting at Ford and Stellantis as well. Meanwhile, Starbucks workers at more than 200 stores in the U.S. went on strike on one of the busiest days of the year for the coffee chain. The Workers' United Union staged the walkout, which is part of a 2-year effort to unionize Starbucks stores. In other news, Walmart reported strong quarterly gains as its low prices continue to attract shoppers, while U.S. applications for jobless claims rose last week, signaling a potential cooling of the labor market. A new poll found that most U.S. adults eat meat several times a week, highlighting the challenge of getting people to eat less meat in order to address climate change. Amazon has announced plans to launch vehicle sales in the U.S. next year, allowing local car dealers to sell directly to customers on its site. TikTok and Meta are filing legal challenges against new EU rules designed to counter the dominance of digital giants and make online competition fairer. Finally, President Joe Biden has told Asia-Pacific leaders that the U.S. is committed to high standards in trade and is looking to build economic ties in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your trusted observer from the 6 Degrees world. Today, we have an array of news stories to discuss, from political scandals to international tensions to economic developments. Let's dive in, shall we? First up, we have the scathing allegations against Representative George Santos. The House Ethics Committee has found substantial evidence that Santos knowingly violated ethics guidelines and House rules. If he is removed from office, it is likely that a Democrat or a less conservative Republican will take his place. It seems that Santos may have overstayed his welcome. Next, we turn our attention to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Israeli troops are searching Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, for evidence of Hamas using it as a base. The international community is calling for the protection of civilians in Gaza, with accusations of war crimes being leveled against both sides. It's a tragic situation that demands a thorough investigation and a commitment to peace. In other news, oil prices have hit their lowest levels since July, putting pressure on major oil producers to extend production cuts. This slump in prices is adding strain to the budgets of countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia. It seems that the world's thirst for oil is not as strong as it once was. Moving on, tech CEOs and global leaders gathered to discuss the impact of artificial intelligence on society. While some expressed optimism about AI's potential, others warned of the risks of misusing the technology. Concerns centered around job displacement and the need to retrain workers. It's clear that AI is a double-edged sword that requires careful management. Meanwhile, Chinese social media platform Weibo has seen a shift in tone from anti-US and nationalist influencers following the meeting between Presidents Xi Jinping and Joe Biden. Netizens have reacted sarcastically to this sudden change, calling influential figures two-faced. It seems that politics and public opinion can be a fickle thing. Speaking of US-China relations, President Biden has struck a deal with President Xi Jinping to curb the fentanyl trade. In exchange, the US will lift restrictions on a Chinese agency accused of human rights violations. It's a delicate balancing act between addressing the fentanyl crisis and maintaining international standards of human rights. Turning to the Middle East, the recent conflict in Gaza has damaged Western power and credibility in the global South. The West's sudden interest in this region has been met with accusations of double standards and genocide. It's clear that the West's reputation has taken a hit, and Israel's failure to define a viable future for itself and the Palestinians has not helped matters. In domestic news, a recent poll shows that more than 70% of Americans are concerned about attacks by Islamic terrorists in the U.S. This concern has increased since the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016, and the recent Hamas incursion into Israel. It will be interesting to see how this concern plays out in future elections. On the diplomatic front, Chinese President Xi Jinping has been courting Indo-Pacific leaders in a flurry of talks at a summit in San Francisco. These meetings highlight the intensifying competition between China and the United States in the region. It's a delicate dance between cooperation and competition that will shape the future of the Indo-Pacific. Finally, we have some news on President Biden himself. It seems that he is not likely to be charged in the special counsel investigation into his handling of classified documents. However, a report critical of Biden and his aides is expected to be released in the coming months. It's a reminder that no politician is immune to scrutiny. That wraps up our news for today. I hope you enjoyed this whirlwind tour of the world's happenings. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions? Let's open up the floor for discussion. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.